Welcome to the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. Brought to you by Blue Sky Business Consulting. We discuss 5 questions in about 15 minutes. Thanks again for joining us, everyone. We are very glad that you have chosen to join us again this week for another episode of the Team Engagement Podcast. And I am very excited to welcome Julie Chakraverty, and she is all the way from London, England. She is the founder of Rungway. And Julie, thank you for joining us today. We've turned our cameras off, everyone, for those who are usually watching it, just to increase the bandwidth since we're going across the pond there. But Julie, thank you so much for joining us. What would you like the audience to know about Rungway?
Thank you, Sean. It's great to be with you. So Rungway is a new approach to employee listening for people, no matter their rung on the career ladder, to speak up at work. We help leaders get ahead of emerging issues through fast feedback loops, and we prioritize what they need to act on and when. It's very hard to make something like a change program succeed, for example, without an always-on two-way dialogue. So that's what Rungway is.
Oh, I love it. And that is so needed, because one of the big hangups that I encounter when I'm working with clients is the upper folks, the owners, the owner, the business, the entrepreneur, whoever it is, they often struggle with being able to hear the input from their employees. And I love what you guys are doing to help further that and promote that. So well done. Love that. All right.
Thank you.
You are welcome. Well, Julie, as you've been building your business, is there a challenge that you've overcome that you're especially proud of?
Well, launching your own business isn't easy. There are so many hurdles to overcome. If I think through the challenges, Sean, I mean, the first one, just attracting and keeping great people when nobody's heard of your company, that is hard. You need a really unique solution to a big enough problem that you have to genuinely care about, because this journey takes years. There are no shortcuts. You're always having to raise capital. And when you're selling into other businesses like we do, you need to win deals against much bigger, better resourced competitors who have enormous name recognition. So I guess for me, the greatest challenge has been self-out, if I'm honest, during those really tough moments. I think the easiest thing would have been, throw in the towel, go back to the 9 to 5, but I did stay the course. And I'm really proud, Sean, that I've started a company in my basement that today has 100,000 users in 20 countries with some really amazing big name clients. And so anyone listening to this podcast, Sean, they can do it too.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. It is so inspiring to hear you say that, because it is tempting for anybody that started a business. You reach a point, I feel like every entrepreneur reaches a point where they think more than once about kind of throwing in the towel, as you said, and going back to the 905 job job. And I'll tell you, it's worth it if you can hang in there and see your way through and overcome the hurdles and all those things. But I love your inspiration, and I love your enthusiasm for what you've accomplished. So well done. Congratulations on what you've accomplished so far.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Question number 2. As a leader, how can you help to foster a climate or a culture of creativity within the company or within a team?
So I've served on quite a few company boards, and I really don't believe that creativity is a natural practice or habit, or frankly, even a business priority in most companies, even though we all love to talk about it. Something I've done that has worked, about 10 years ago, I set up and then I chaired what we called an innovation committee for a global financial services firm. And what really worked there was enlisting different voices, really seeking out the next generation of talent and empowering them to coach the board in how to look around the corner, how to think about future trends. And at that time, it was, how on earth are consumers going to go digital? So bringing in kind of younger voices, less conservative voices to really influence the board, that's very important. I think in my work with companies today, the fastest route to creativity is something, Sean, you said earlier about culture. How do you create a culture where people feel comfortable expressing ideas, calling out poor practice? Because creativity won't happen without honesty. And it also needs collaboration. So you might want to think about an ideas jam where people are encouraged and incentivized to come together to suggest solutions and ideas anonymously. unsolved problems. And lastly, I would say that I think you really need to feel relaxed and recharged before you're going to surface any good ideas. And I would say my most creative ideas, the really good ones and the really kind of terrible ones, but they were all creative. They all came when I was either on vacation or on a break of some sort. So I would think about where, when, and how you recharge your batteries.
I love that because you're exactly right. I was just thinking that right before you said it, that, yeah, I know for me, when I'm relaxed or on vacation specifically, that's when all the ideas come just flowing in. And so I really appreciate all of those ideas and tips and suggestions. I feel like you really nailed it because we do need to create an environment where people are relaxed. And I love that you created an innovation committee, if I heard that correctly, where you're bringing in different voices and different perspectives and allowing people to learn a little bit from either a younger generation or a less conservative, whatever it is, to allow people to think a little bit differently. And that's where that creativity comes from. I think that's fantastic. So I love those comments. Well done. That's great. All right. Well, question number 3, how can leaders help their team members learn to trust each other a little bit better?
So trust is really important in today's companies where we're under the spotlight like never before. And I think remote working has made it harder to foster trust because, look, most of us are spending less time physically together. So in my experience, trust needs a safe space where questions can be asked without fear of negative consequence or fear of judgment or just fear of looking stupid or people saying, oh, she's a troublemaker. And we can't take for granted that our people have equal trust at work. And I wanted to share with you, Sean, some data that we found on Rungway, where we see in some of the best companies in the world, women ask more questions anonymously than men, as do people of color. And the color piece, and you've seen, Sean, non-white person, full disclosure, I was really fascinated to see that when people of color ask questions anonymously, they get more answers than if they show their name or photo. Whereas, isn't that interesting? Whereas for you and for white posters, it doesn't make any difference. So trust isn't equal in the workplace. And therefore, I think as leaders, we really have to role model. Why does anyone need to trust us? And so we need to really kind of look at ourselves in the mirror and think, what does it feel like to be led by us? Are we open about our own vulnerability? Are we transparent about how we made a decision and when we got it wrong? And are we really living the values that we promised when we hired that person? And in my company, we have a values award every month that are all hands, where anyone can nominate somebody who's displayed one of our core values like impact, but every comment is read out. And it's so important to keep reinforcing that values count so that you can sustain trust through the good times and the bad.
Wow, that's some great ideas there. And core values, I cannot talk enough about core values. In my estimation, values dictate decisions, and it should drive a lot of how we behave in an organization or in our personal lives, whatever it may be. But I love that you are taking the opportunity to emphasize and recognize those individuals in your company that are living and demonstrating to a high level those values. And so it is so important to live by those, and then of course build the trust between each other, because boy, that makes as you said, makes a big difference when you're trying to move a company forward. If people can't trust each other, don't feel comfortable sharing ideas or asking a question. And I love that you said that, we got to be careful about stifling anyone that's a non-white or any kind of a minority of any kind, but also any of those who just have fear. They don't want to ask the question for fear of reprisal, whatever it is, or their perception or anything like that. But wow, you said a lot of great things in there, Julie. I really like those comments. All right. Well, question number 4. I'm sure this has never happened to you or your company, Julie, but once in a while, a company or a person will do something that might initially be perceived as a failure, but they turn it into a win. And if you've got an example of where that might have happened in your career or in your current business with Rungway, we'd love to hear that.
So there were so many, Sean, I had to really think about, okay, which one do I want to share? So when I decided to start out building a kind of portfolio board career, on your side of the pond, you would call it an independent board director. Here in the UK, we call it a non-executive, but it's a portfolio board career. And this was about 15 years ago. It was really tough because I was 20 years younger than the average board member. And I was about 30 years younger than most of the chairmen, on top of being kind of very few women, very few people of color. But it was really the young, it was the age piece that made me stand out. And to be honest, there were quite a few depressing experiences. One chairman at an interview, he said, "Frankly, my dear, you look young enough to be my granddaughter, but we need to interview diverse people, so here we are." That was kind of awful. I also arrived at a lunch for board chairs and deputy chairmen when I was deputy chair, which was great. It was at one of the big four accounting firms, and I was just escorted to the lunch for company secretaries and kind of left there. And one chairman on a board that I did join, I noticed, Sean, that he would rarely include any of my suggestions or comments in the board minutes. So I couldn't understand, am I wearing an invisibility cloak? Why is he ignoring me? And what do I do? Because I don't want to be seen as a troublemaker. Right. And what I did is I worked to find some separate mentors who could understand this dynamic and also who would want to help, because not everybody does. And I found these individuals, and they taught me maybe that there is an assumption around that board table, because I look young, that I was forming my conclusions without really listening or understanding. And so they gave me some incredible advice, which was adapt your style. So I physically showed that I was listening, and it's a shame, Sean, we don't have the cameras on, but go with me now. I'm nodding. I'm kind of frowning like, I'm stroking my chin. And younger people listening to this podcast, never take notes in a board meeting. You can write it down now, but don't take notes in a board meeting, because while an older note taker looks kind of diligent, you're just going to look like a rookie who doesn't know anything. So I stopped scribbling everything down, and I would try a little synthesis of what you had just said, Sean, before I follow on with my suggestion, to show in an elegant way that I had listened to you and I understood what you were saying. And this really worked. So I would say, try these things, and remember, failure isn't the end. It's actually a head start to come at something from a different angle. Maybe your solution will benefit hundreds or thousands or millions of other people too. And that experience sparked the idea for the mentor in your back pocket. And that became the first version of Rungway.
That's some great comments. Again, great comments, because you talked about the importance of just, I really appreciate, Julie, that you are willing to receive a little bit of feedback on how you can be a little bit more, I don't know what the right word is, professional or respected, I guess, just by simply making a few adjustments. And it's a good reminder to all of us that sometimes we do need to look within ourselves to kind of say, well, do I need to do things a little bit differently? Am I giving some kind of an image or a projection of some kind that's coming across negatively? And at the same time, it's sad to me that you even had to deal with that in the first place. It would be nice if we can just get to a point where we kind of just listen to everybody, regardless of outward appearances. But well done. And I love what you said about failure is not the end, it's a head start. I think that was a great comment. I love that. Love that. All right, Julie, our last question. Tell us a little bit about your first job.
Well, my father was a record producer and my mother a microbiologist. So I always wanted to follow in at least one of their footsteps. But my first ever job was at a UK teen fashion brand called Miss Selfridge, working in a very big shopping mall that is well known to any of your listeners who live in North London. And the job basically involved helping customers into the changing room, picking up everything that they dropped on the floor and hanging it back out. And that was my first job. I loved the feeling of independence. Getting my first ever pay slip, which I've saved to this day, was an incredible, achievement when you feel super excited as a teenager. I realized then that I loved interacting with customers, but I also realized fashion was not my forte. So I turned to finance as the next best thing after I graduated, Sean.
Oh, I love hearing the story of how people get kind of started, whether it's what's fun about that question. I've asked it since the very first podcast that I did. It's been fun to listen to people talk a little bit about their first job and how it influenced their current career as an entrepreneur, whether it fed into it, whether they realized that working for someone else was not what they wanted to do, whatever it was. But you were in retail, you loved working with the customers. I love that story. Thanks so much for sharing that. And Julie, thank you so much again for taking time to jump on the podcast with us today. How can people find you?
So you can follow me on LinkedIn. We also have a Rungway page on LinkedIn. And of course, you can look at the Rungway website, rungway.com.
Very good. Well, thanks so much. We appreciate it. And I wish everyone to have a great week. And thanks again for joining us. And we'll see you next time. This is Sean Richards with the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. For more ideas, go to teamengagementpodcast.com. We also invite you to follow or subscribe to our podcast wherever you may be listening or watching. Is your business thriving? Go to tbs-score.com to find out. Thanks for joining us today. Have a great day.